Do you want me to? Like, I'm just
Of course I want you here.
I just don't want to get in the way of this bromance so that you
You
guys
were going on about
understand.
some fucking thing that you couldn't handle the heat or something.
I can't handle the I'm as pantless as a news anchor right now.
All right.
Nice.
Yeah.
Just-
Nice.
all right. Press record, Ryan.
I am recording. I
right.
wanted the whole internet to know.
He's not wearing any pants, ladies and gentlemen.
No. And if I spend any more money on vinyl, I'm going to lose my shirt too. All right, let's go.
That's your fucking. All right. Here we go. Welcome back to the Rockman Power Hour, a podcast where we talk to the most interesting people in the world of pop culture and everything in between. And this week on the show, we are joined by Tommy Vext. Now, if you don't know who Tommy Vext is, you're obviously not a fan of metal and of modern alternative music, because his name has been associated with some of the biggest acts and biggest musicians in the world over the last couple of decades. He's most recently risen to success with the band Bad Wolves. He no longer is in Bad Wolves, but had a massive hit worldwide with their cover of the Cranberries' Zombies. No longer with the band, but has a solo career, is very outspoken, very political, and very, very interesting. Now, I loved this conversation. We talked to Tommy a couple of months back. And we've been sitting on this one for a little while since we've chatted with him. There's been a lot of developments in his career. He's decided that this will be the last solo tour that he's going to be embarking on in the fall. He has a new album called Antarctica that's coming out, and he has just announced that he will be taking over vocal duties for the band Il Nino in Europe on their upcoming European tour. So Tommy's got a lot going on. He's also a sober brother of mine. We've both been in recovery for a long, long time. So I'm very excited to have him on the podcast with us this week on the show. Before we get too far, let us thank our friends over at Heartbeat Hot Sauce, the heartbeat of the Rockman Power Hour. And if you use our promo code Rockman20, you'll get 20% off your entire order, and that promo code never goes away. Also, thank you to our friends at Audio Technica Canada, Mike Marino, our rep over there, and the whole gang always take great care of us. And our friends at Studio House Designs. I love this Talk to Me shirt. Talk to Me was one of the movies we saw at Fantasia in 2023 that just stole our hearts and a lot of people's. And Studio House Designs are just great when it comes to rocking out some of the best shirts, movie themed, that you can buy anywhere out of Philadelphia. Great company. Check them out at studiohousedesigns.com. All right. Without any further ado, I want to jump right into this. Tommy Vext is our guest this week. I think you're going to enjoy this chat. Keep in mind, this was recorded a couple of months back. So, when it comes to Tommy Vext's life and his career, things are always moving and evolving. And within, since we've recorded this, things have already changed for him. But a great guy, someone I love to, very proud to call a friend, and excited for you to hear this conversation. So check it out. Our talk with Tommy Vext on the Rockman Power Hour. All right, welcome back to the Rockman Power Hour. Really, really happy to have with me a guy I've known for a long, long time. I'm excited to have him on the show because I know him from several different projects. I know him through several different people. And you don't get much more stand-up than this guy. He shoots from the hip. He says what he means, and he means what he says. And I'm glad that we finally got to get him on the podcast. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome Tommy Vext to our podcast. Sir.
Howdy, folks.
Thanks for coming on, man. You and I have a very, so we don't know each other that well, but I feel like we know each other really well because
we're like family removed, sort of.
We are. And it's a crazy thing. Cause am I free to talk about this stuff?
Yeah.
So we're both sober guys. And the thing is, when you're a sober guy, especially if you're a 12-step guy, it's almost like it's almost like extended family. So wherever you go, if you're part of a 12-step group, you're part of this fellowship, and it's really nice because you can walk into any room anywhere in the world and you immediately have friends that are like-minded, that are going through the same struggles as you. So you and I have a lot of connections in that world. And one of the guys that you're very, very close to, who is also very, very close to me, a guy named Sonny Mayo, whose name comes up on this show quite often. And I've
Yeah.
just found out through a little birdie that he's upset with me because I haven't had him on yet. But he's you and I kind of got to know each other through that. And then I when I found out that you were going to be the guy who was going to be filling in, well, not filling in, but you were going to be the guy that was going to take the reins as the front man for Snot. I really, really started paying attention. So there's that. And then, of course, there's this whole thing where you start this band, you come to Canada, and I end up helping to get you guys played on the radio for your single Zombie.
Which,
And
which because of you,
I get one of these, which was a
yeah.
really nice thing.
So because of you, Zombie went platinum in Canada before it went platinum in America. So thank you. Round of applause.
Wow. Okay.
Definitely one of the guys that fought to get it played on radio. And I remember when you came into the studio, you came at the same time as Jacoby from Papa Roach, and it was just a really, really nice moment to not only celebrate the fact that this song was getting so much play, but that you and I got to finally share the same space.
Yeah. And also too, like it, people, I always bring this up. The proceeds from Zombie were actually donated to Dolores O'Riordan's 4 children. So like all of the profits that I would have made from the song sales and from the royalties, I allocated to a trust fund in the kids' names. And so everybody at radio and everybody at YouTube who really helped facilitate making the song, which is like it's a multi-platinum. Like at this point, I think it's at like I think it's 8 million in sales. It's something insane, and that money continuously goes to her family. So that's like what I think that's just me having a small part in being part of the rock community and how much good we did for a family that lost an irreplaceable, not only an irreplaceable artist and woman, but a mother. Um, it was one of the greatest honors of my life, and also something that wouldn't have happened probably if I wasn't sober.
Right. Yeah. And the story behind that whole thing, how you guys literally were going to be doing this was supposed to be a duet with her, right?
Yeah, so I recorded the song. The interesting thing about the song is I'm in the band. I'm the only person that recorded or wrote on it. And
Right.
so Philip Naslin and I was sober coaching in LA, and I was making music on the side. And Philip was one of my coworkers. So he's a Swedish producer and a guitar player and a guitar teacher, masterful musician. And we had done a couple songs together, and we were like, oh, we should do this song. And then when I got signed after filling in for Ivan, the record label said we don't have any singles on this record on the Bad Wolf stuff. And I
Right.
was like, well, I have this cover. And I submitted it, and turns out Dan, the president of the record label in England, grew up with Dolores and,
Wow.
and sent her the track. And so on mid December, I'm at Wembley Arena on the Five Finger tour, just supporting Ivan and everybody.
Mhm.
And I meet Dan in person, and I fly home. And 2 days later, I get a voicemail from Dolores, and she's like, "Oh my God, this song's killer! Like, I got to be on it." And originally, we just sent it to her to see if she would write a blurb about it or say this is
Kind
a
of give it
great track.
get her
Yeah,
blessing.
just to give a seal of approval. Because
Sure.
to be honest, I was insecure about the song as a cover because I had only done one other cover in my entire career of, you know what I mean, of 17 years at the time. So I was like, I don't know. Like, and so it turned into that. And then she flew to London to record on January 6th or 7th. And on the 7th, she actually passed away.
Oh
Man.
my.
Yeah. So it was a roller coaster of like, the expectation of like for me of, oh, I'm gonna get to do a duet with this woman who sang the soundtrack of my teenage
Sure. Yeah.
angst, you know what I mean? Because there's during the grunge era and like the Lilith Fair bands and I also grew up in New York, so it was like we didn't have musical discrimination in the
Yeah.
hardcore.
Mm-mm.
So you could go see hardcore bands and Biohazard and Life of Agony and Candiria and E-Town Concrete and Shadows Fall, and then go see Pantera and Korn, or go see Fiona Apple and Bjork. You
Right,
know,
exactly. That's the thing about the 90s, and I always say this. The 90s were really special because there was no discrimination with music. Like, music was a massive melting pot. And it's true. And I find, yes, of course, nowadays music's so open and you can go anywhere and find music. But back then, it was very, very like all over the place. So for you to have a,
you remember, you were in this. You've been in the sea. You're a legend. Like, you remember Lollapalooza.
yeah,
You know, you could go to Lollapalooza and Snoop Dogg. Like, I remember going to Lollapalooza and I saw Snoop Dogg, Trick Daddy, Korn,
yeah,
Tool, and like the Chemical Brothers. And the year before, Metallica played with Wu Tang. Like,
yeah, yeah. It
it
was
was,
it was everywhere. And
yeah.
that was Perry. So, Perry Farrell, when he founded it in 91 and then breaks up Jane's Addiction, has that be the farewell tour on the first Lollapalooza. And I remember kicking myself that I couldn't go to it. I was still drinking. And then the year later I got sober. And I remember I got sober July 25th, and I think it was like August 7th or 8th. I had been sober like a week and a half. I had tickets to go to Lollapalooza in 1992 in Boston.
Oh, nice.
And I remember my sponsor at the time was like, I don't know if it's a good idea that you go out of town to a show. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? I'm going. Pearl Jam on 10.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
Soundgarden
Mhm.
on Bad Motorfinger. They get up and they do Temple of the Dog stuff. Chili Peppers on Blood Sugar Sex Magic. Ministry on, Psalm 69. It was just Ice Cube. It was nuts. So yes,
Yeah.
and that was like early 90s. So the precursor to that 90s was that crazy period in the late 80s where anything went. You had bands like Faith No More, you had bands like Living Color, you had bands like Fishbone. I mean, they were really, and Chili's, early Chili Peppers, just melding styles and stuff. So yes, we were born into a decade in the 90s that just gave us open everything.
I mean, how do you think that that translates to listeners? Because I've definitely watched. You know, I'm 42, and I grew up in the New York hardcore scene, but I also moved to LA and then lived in the LA scene. I met, I lived with squatter punks and in like the early 2000s, and being so immersed in the culture, not just as an artist but as a consumer of music.
Right.
I definitely have saw there's been this shift, and I don't know if it has to do with the internet, but micro genres
Mhm.
sort of become these little like factions, and it's almost like they stay in these little bubbles of like only a certain kind of people can listen to this, and only a certain, like, there's like true metal and black metal, and then there's like gent metal and progressive metal, and there's all these micro labels that I find people, trying to identify with. It's like hardcore, and then there's like post-hardcore, and
Yeah.
you and like, to us, I mean, when I was a kid, we just were like, it's either it was good or it
Where it
sucked.
sucked.
Yeah,
that,
you know what I mean.
that
Like,
that happened to me when I was like 13. I was like, Big Shiny Tunes 2 in Canada comes out, and like that's just all the hits that were on the radio in Canada at the time. And like, we listen to Sugar Ray, listen to Marilyn Manson. It's all the same. It is music. You're discovering music. Music is fun.
Mm.
But then as I became 14 or 15 and got more immersed in the punk scene, then I kind of like, I don't exactly know when it happened, but I started to be told constantly that I'm not allowed to like rap music and I'm not allowed to like metal music. So what you're saying, like, we didn't even have the little subgenres. I always thought the many genres of metal was a little intimidating to even remember. I'm like, I can't remember the seven dwarves. I'm not going to remember what gent metal is. Okay. So, but will it piss my mom off? Awesome.
yeah,
That was really it. But then later in life, all of a sudden, I was like 13 again. I was like, wait a second, I don't have to go out and get drunk every night. I could stay at home and play Nintendo with my friends. And I'm like 20. I'm like, that was everything that was great about being 13. And so was music. And ever since then, been massively, massively more open to all this. But I like the fact that you're telling me that in New York, it was perfectly normal to just like all these genres of music, and that would explain what a strange but awesome band Biohazard is, because that's a product of the
yeah.
hardcore scene, rap scene, and
You
yeah,
look
that's
at you
really
look at
fascinating.
you look at typo. Like, how do you even quantify? You have, so here's three bands that all came out of Lemoore's
Mhm.
same time: Typo Negative,
Yeah.
Biohazard, Life of Agony. They all ended up on Roadrunner. None of them sound the same. Then,
No.
like, you have other Brooklyn legacy bands. Like, Candiria is a jazz metal hardcore rap band fronted by a Jamaican dude with horn sections
Yeah.
and breakdowns so heavy that, I mean, it was so ahead of its time.
Yeah.
And no song structure. It would never repeat.
Yeah.
It was like the Ma Vishnu Orchestra, like it would just keep going. Then you have bands like Dillinger Escape Plan that came out, right? And then, you know, like God Forbid, which is the only black metal band because the whole band. This is also the irony of God Forbid. The whole band, all the guys are brothers except the bass player is white. I'm like, the bass player's wait, that's the one thing that we I was
Yeah.
like, this is so fucking, you know. And
Yeah.
so all these different bands and the thing is, God Forbid was just like, they just were like Slayer. They were like if Black Guys made Slayer in the beginning.
Yeah.
So
Don't, yeah.
so there was no, like race and ethnicity and culture and what city you came. None of that mattered. Nobody
No,
cared.
no, nobody cared. And you look at, and what's great too is that, there were no New York was very it was New York's always been kind of ground zero for creative and for breaking down barriers. And but then there's artists in New York like and that came out of the hardcore scene, guys like Walter Schreifels from Quicksand. I mean,
Mm,
Walter can do whatever Walter wants to do, and that's what I love about him. Like, he can do Quicksand, and then he can go do Rival Schools, and then he can have a solo folk record, and then he can go back to Gorilla Biscuits and play in Youth of Today, and that's what he does now. And he's out there every weekend. He's out touring with a different one of his bands, and it's
mm.
beautiful to see because there's just so many different directions you can go in music. Do you think you leaving New York and going to LA was a hindrance to that? Do you think that, because I know that LA, I know for myself when I went to LA, like from being from Montreal and then going to LA was very much like everybody wanted to put you in a category.
Uh, yeah. Well, you know what I mean? I think this is the thing that. So I moved to LA and did Divine Heresy, which was a death metal band, and then I brought melody to it. So we were like Kill Switch and Gage on steroids. Like it was just, Tim Young on drums, blast beats. Like, Tim's played for Morbid Angel, I Hate God, and then you have Dino from Fear Factory Legacy, and then Joe, who passed away, unfortunately, was the bass player of Nile. So you have all these guys
Yeah.
from like the nerdy tech death and like, the syncopated future metal, scene. And
Mm.
then me, who's from the New York hardcore scene, but can sing.
Yeah.
And it turned into Bleed the Fifth. And then when I left that band, and obviously a lot of people know the controversy, me and Dino didn't get along. We had a fight. I left. And then Mikey and Sonny poached me to audition for Snot. Now, Divine Heresy sounds nothing like Snot.
No, no.
But because of my background and my experience playing alongside bands that were like playing ska and playing punk and seeing the exploited and you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
being aware of that culture and also being a fan of the band, like I was able to absorb what Lynn was doing and make it sound as close to what he sounded like as possible.
Yeah.
But also the live show had elements of Biohazard, Candiria, E-Town Concrete, which a lot of those fans don't know what that is.
For sure.
So when I fronted Snot, I brought the California coast that already existed within the identity of the band and some of that real constant movement over the top New York hardcore guy thing. And it actually blended enough that nobody noticed I wasn't Lynn.
Right.
Right. Like, cause that's the job, right? My job is, to this day, right before I get on stage, I say the same prayer for 20 years. Please God, make this not about me.
Right.
Right. Even before I was sober, you know, like give me the strength to go put on a show so that people can have a break from our horrible lives because that's what I needed. And that's why I went to so many shows. And that's why I grew up in that scene because I needed to get out of the noise in my head or I grew up in an unsafe environment. And I understand the responsibility as a performer which I'm sure you understand, is like we're there to get you out of yourselves for just a little bit. And I get validation when I can do that successfully. And that means I'm doing my job and then I have value.
How do you feel when I can imagine every show you play, you probably play in your head, you're like, there's 10,000 people here, give it everything, leave the stage, bare a wreck of a man. I got to give them everything I got. How do you feel when you play in front of like a smaller crowd? Do you still bring the same intensity that you would? Because we're all performers. We know the instant gratification
Yeah,
when you
yeah.
hear a roaring crowd. You
Uh,
feel like Superman.
so obviously I went from Bad Wolves when like I left Bad Wolves ironically on January 7th of 2021. So
Mm,
Dolores passed on January 7th of 2018 and the band
Crazy.
launched. And within 3 years, like I've been out of the band longer than the band was a band.
mhm,
And I went on my own and independently toured, and just off, my Instagram was deleted after this tour for because my shows were all sold out. It was problematic. uh,
mm,
and I was doing 500 to 1,200 tickets a night in the middle of the pandemic. It had more value because there were some powerful people in the industry who had a problem with my beliefs, and they wanted to shut me up, and they wanted me to go away, and they wanted to subjugate my freedom of speech because it didn't align with what they thought. A lot of people falsely believed they were on the right side of history during that time,
Mhm.
and they were willing. And it's funny because I was actually watching this Hitler documentary on Netflix, and it's fascinating to me. I always, my whole life, I've always been into history, and I'm like, how could they get all these people to go along with ratting out their neighbors, putting people in camps, but hating blaming the whole world on one group of people, and then you saw the campaigns during the pandemic, and then how they treated unvaccinated people, or how anybody who had an opinion that wasn't strategically aligned with the preferred script was destroyed. I've had the experience of singing for Five Finger and playing in front of 300,000 screaming German fans, or 150,000 Austrian fans or British fans, and I've opened up for these bands, and I've played festivals with Bad Wolves as my own band, and I've stood on stage in all over America and Europe and Australia opening for Nickelback, and had people sing Zombie back louder than the amps. But there was something about this club run with no management, no radio support, no record label, and everyone going against me and trying to, an entire media, like, we know every metal and rock media is owned by a record label. There's two record labels that own every single one except Rockfeed. So they basically went on an offensive against me to discredit me. There were soft money was given to an ex of mine to fucking drudge up fake Me Too charges. I mean, they wanted me out of here. And every night I wouldn't, I didn't want to know the ticket counts because I had constant anxiety because I was psychologically, I felt like I was being punished for saying what I knew in my heart was right. And the people showed up,
Hmm.
and they were like, "You're canceled." And the people were like, "No, you can't have him." Like, no, you don't get to tell us who we want to support, and like I had a GoFundMe, and it raised $200,000, and then the label had to shut down, and they were shutting everything down on me systematically because I look at it now and I'm like, I understand. The issue was is that Bad Wolves was set to be an arena band,
Right.
and the band, I think the label didn't know that I wrote all the hit songs. The label also didn't know that the band did not perform on the records, and they didn't write the records.
Did you? So
So
let me. So when you signed to the label, did you go with a pre like a pre like you went with a record that was already finished? Like you're like here part and parcel.
I produced the record. I
Right.
paid for it. right? The guys in the band, like Doc used to work for me at my sober companion firm. John was an Uber driver. Kyle was moving gear at, he still works at Mates, and Chris was a guitar tech for the Chainsmokers. So like I was the only one clearing, the kind of figures that could pay for an album to get done.
Right.
And John had started the project. It was a side project, and he wrote a couple of metal songs with Max from Once Human.
Okay.
So that's Logan's band, Logan's old band with his ex-girlfriend fronting it, Lauren. So it's a female-fronted death metal band. So Max and John were friends, and they wrote a bunch of demos and had nobody to sing for it. And I sang a couple of songs. I was still in my old band, and it was great. And so he gave me a bunch more, but he had run out of money. So I was like, all right, I'm going to take over, and the material is really cool. And that record I delivered was not, the label said it wasn't good enough. So I went in the studio with Max and I wrote Officer Down, and I wrote No Masters. And then I went in the studio with Drew Folk and Zoltan. This is what most people don't realize. Zoltan helped write Remember When.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And if you listen to Five Finger and then you listen to some of the stuff, you can kind of hear the structure.
Sure.
So, and then Hear Me Now was a song that Brandon Sammons had worked on for John. And it was like a melody that was sitting around with no words. And I had found it, and I was like, this could be something. So I brought it in and I gave it to Philip, who played on Zombie, and he put the piano on, and I brought it to Max and he added guitars. And then I wrote the lyrics and sang it. And then Hear Me Now was born.
Right.
And then Alan introduced us to Diamante and asked her if we could have her sing on it to help launch her after Zombie. So the second record too is the same way. So I don't think that the label understood fully who was the creative person behind the songs that were reaching the people.
Right.
And like John and Max wrote great songs, right? Truth or Dare. I don't know. I'll Be There. Awesome song. No Messiah. One of my favorite songs that the band's ever written. I wasn't even there during the, I just came in and sang the vocals and wrote the lyrics, and
right.
But it was the Killing Me Slowlies and the Learn to Walk Again and Sober. These are songs I wrote with Drew Folk. Terrible Things. It wasn't really, we presented the product to the world as a band,
right?
But it was like me and John had two separate like writing situations.
But see, that's a common thing. Anybody that's been around music knows that, like a lot of the time you want to present, when you're presenting something to the public, you want to present it as a band, a band of brothers. But the reality is there's usually a couple of people that are the creative forces. There's all different personalities in bands. You got the guys that just want to show up and play, that don't care. And that's why you see what ends up happening with a lot of bands that continue. If they lose members, if the creative forces are still there, they're willing to carry the name of the band. They're willing to carry the legacy of the band, even though the period of the band that might have had the most popularity doesn't have the members. They're still willing to try to continue.
Yeah.
But you start to see when a band doesn't have what it had for that certain era, it's going to change, like it's like, and this is no diss it by any stretch, but when you look at Head PE, I mean, you and I knew Head PE on the first, dude, the first Head PE record, the second Head PE record, the third Head PE record, like the first two Head PE records, that original Head PE lineup is the fucking shit.
I was just with BC at a wedding.
Yeah, I mean, one of the best fucking most pocket drummers and the best. But that era of the band, as much as Jared is continuing Head PE, is not the same thing.
Sure.
But he's Head PE now. So it's weird when you see enough time passes, a lot of people forget what was what. You know what I mean? So when you get the people that get that era of a band, when they say like, hey, I saw Head PE on the fucking second record on Broke when they were
Mm.
the shit. It's, it's just different.
Some bands, right? Like, and a lot of like legacy bands, like I think that like Deftones they'll still get in a room.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think that bands like Papa Roach, Seven Dust,
Yes.
these guys still all get, and I know them, and I know that this is true.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're a band. Those are bands.
Yeah.
And then then you have like Nine Inch Nails is not a band.
No, it's Trent.
Rob Zombie is not a band. Ozzy Osbourne, not a band. These aren't bands, and that's okay. That's cool. It's just like if I had a time machine, I would not have, because I was the only one who was signed, and I would have just not. I would have just not had to be a band. I would have just been like, I would have called it Vext.
That's what I was going to say. If you could go
And
back
then,
to
yeah, and I would have did it like Chris Daughtry does,
right.
because nobody was, and at the end of the like, one thing that I actually learned from Billy Corgan. So when a band blows up, it's a whirlwind, right? You can't keep up with anything. Like every day is like, it's like in Fight Club where the guy's like, I don't know where I was. Like I'm on a plane and I'm like here. And everything, you're moving so fast and you're doing constant press. And then, also with the advent of social media, it's like I became social media famous at a speed and degree that not anybody really understands.
Right.
And I didn't buy followers. Like, I'm not going to out people. There are people who are more popular than me that, it was like Ronnie Radke, I think, understands this, right? And I think that people like Alex Terrible understands this because they have you could see the metrics of how many people are following and how many people are engaging. And the band members would, they were jealous. Jealousy was something that me and Doc were friends for 20 something years. And I was always his like less successful homie. And, then I got financially successful and I became his boss. And then I put him in my band and I was his boss again, except, nobody like I couldn't turn down, and Jackie was our radio lady and she did a great job, but I couldn't say no to interviews. I couldn't say no to meet and greets. I had no, and also because I'm a people pleaser, right? Like a typical Al-Anon, I said yes to everything. And so I inadvertently, because I was willing to do anything and I was sober and I just became the face of the band.
Right.
And I also, after the show, after I get off stage, that's when I used to do my partying and drinking and drugs. And so when the band blew up, I had 9 years of sobriety when Zombie came out, but my sponsor was like, go be of service. So I went in the crowd and I went to the merch place and I took pictures with people and shook their hands. And then, we're in arenas and people like, I can't believe the singer is doing a signing for free. So what I realized was, we'd sell $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 of merch a night as an opening act. And now the headliner's like, yo, like, cause you're taking their money.
Yeah.
So like people are getting sideways with me. I'm growing in followers because people tag me. So, when my Instagram got deleted, I was at like 500,000 followers. So when I was touring, I would just make a post and with a ticket link and people like,
Yeah.
So, that was the benefit. But what I didn't see is what Billy Corgan talks about in his Joe Rogan podcast. Just by working too much and working too hard, I stepped on the toes of my fellows and they retaliated.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Even though the money that I was generating and the attention I was generating was benefiting the whole team, because I don't have that personality, I didn't see that I was creating a space for jealousy to develop with other people who believe that they should have what I have.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that it's not a way that I think. And I had to learn that about myself. right? I had to learn that like I'm a workaholic, and when other people don't have the same drive, or they, they feel like now it's time to relax.
Mm.
Like I'm the person who's like, all right, we're successful. Now we really got to go,
Yeah, we got to grind.
Gotcha,
right?
gotcha.
Other people are like, we made it. Like it's time to take the shoes off and put on the, like put on the robe and slippers. And I'm like, I don't have, we have completely different mentalities.
Right.
That's
You know?
exactly when a lot of bands fall off, when they're like, we're exhausted, we took a break, and then they never came. They came back a year later, and music moved on without them. Like it's fascinating you say that because like a band like the Ramones, who never stopped, 20,
Mhm.
20 years, they never stopped. They kept putting, even when Johnny got in a fight and his head kicked in and was in a coma, like they woke up, they made Too Tough to Die. They made their best album in years. They kept going. But a lot of bands, like, not a metal band, but I watch a lot of documentaries and stuff, and I was watching Behind the Music of New Kids on the Block, and it's funny that they were the face of pop music for all these years, and then this is what happens. They usually fire the manager, then they take a then they do their thing, they take a break, and then that's when they lose it, you
Mm.
know? Because sometimes even like with a manager who like rips off, there's an amazing documentary on YouTube called The Boy Band Con, like the guy who put together Backstreet Boys and NSYNC was like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
stealing senior citizens' monies, pretending to be an airline. It's crazy, but it all has something in common. Like it seems like in pop music, that you have a 5-year window, and then your audience gets too old for you or something. In metal, that doesn't happen.
No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like with Iron Maiden and Metallica and all these other bands, they're more famous now than they've ever been, and it keeps happening again and again. I think metal is like music that you can age to, and it's not embarrassing to like in your 50s and 60s because
Well,
it's still awesome.
it's a lifestyle brand, not
Mhm.
a trend,
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? And so, like, I'm experiencing this too, right? Like, after 2021, I had, I had made I made a lot of money, and I had a lawsuit that was favorable to me. That's all I could say. And then but I felt like Thanos at the end of the first Infinity Wars. And I just was so like it being in a lawsuit with a billionaire. I
Mm.
don't recommend it, bro. These people will spend every every resource they have to mentally, emotionally drag you, and that's the game,
Mm.
right? Like I'm used to being like, a regular guy. Like I grew up fighting as a kid. Like if there's a bar fight, guys like fuck you. I'm like cool, let's go outside. Boom, boom, boom. Win, lose or draw, you both walk away.
Right.
There's a different mentality between like these businesses where they do corporate sabotage and like it's I mean it's just it's not something that I left that situation and I won for in all metric senses, but I felt like I got beat up by Mike Tyson in his prime. And like
Mm.
I was just so tired. And I went to Nashville and I stopped singing. Like I just moved away and like got a house and chilled. And I needed it. I
Mm.
needed a mental health reset,
Yeah.
And then I had booked a tour to come back and I was so out of shape that I actually injured a vocal cord screaming on tour
Oh.
rehearsals and had to postpone my whole tour. And then I wound up moving to Vegas. Well, I went to Europe for a while. Then I went to Vegas, and I need like I remember being because I understand this like you're like if you just sit down and wait, like it's gonna pass you by and they'll find somebody else. And like I watched Bad Wolves completely fall off. I mean, from their and no and like not in a like it doesn't please me for them to fail because I lose money
Hmm.
and I still make like all the top streams of battles, the top 20 songs that they have on their streaming platforms is me. And that's not good because if they put out more hits, if they had more gold records and more platinum records, it would naturally increase my streams
Right.
and I would make more money. So this idea, like I think there's some of the guys in the band are like, he wants to destroy us. I'm like, I actually don't. and I wish you would have hired Howard Jones instead of the guy you got,
Howard,
because
dude,
Howard can,
Howard is the shit. I
yeah. I'm
remember.
like, if you're gonna switch your singer, upgrade, don't downgrade. You know what I
Well,
mean?
I remember when Slaves on Dope opened for Kill Switch, and this was like way back in like
Yeah,
2000, probably
2003.
2001 or 2003, and Howard was in the band, and they got the other guy back, which is still cool and all that.
Yeah, I love Jesse. Great
Yeah,
guy.
but dude, when they had Howard, man, he was the fucking bomb, man. That guy
Yeah,
was
well,
amazing.
he's a powerhouse, and he's also at that phase of his life. He was also very athletic.
Yeah,
I remember Divine Heresy opened the metal stage on Soundwave, and it was me and Bleeding Through. So you had Brandon, who's like Captain Abs. Shadows Fall. You had As I Lay Dying, and Tim had just started lifting weights, and Howard in his prime, and like you're like it was just the meathead stage.
yeah,
And every day we would meet in catering and be like, "Yo, who's gonna have the craziest show?" And we
yeah.
started, you know, I would be like, "All right, we're gonna do the Wall of Death," and then and that's Brandon had everyone run around the tent in a circle pit, and then Howard climbed the rafters and he did the even flow drop,
Jesus.
like, and everyone was like, "Oh my god!" Like everybody was like, it was like, and that was the cool thing. It was like a bunch of American metal artists, and we're like staying in the same hotel and on the same bus and on the same plane, and there was this camaraderie of like who can do more,
Yeah,
and and the audience benefited because it was like, you rest on your laurels, like when and this is I've seen this happen, like opening for Five Finger, like Ivan, I've seen Ivan headline at a festival, and then I've seen him go on after like either Bad Wolves or another sick band, and this happens to all of us. We're not me, like, and that it raises the bar,
everywhere.
and
Yeah, of
it's
course.
like there's this camaraderie amongst us where we're like, all right, like who's gonna amp up the crowd the most, and that's the kind of environment that makes people want to keep coming to shows.
Well, I remember being out with Slaves, and we it was like our first U.S. tour after Ozfest. So we did Ozfest in 2000, and then we went out in September right after Ozfest in the summer, and we did 2 weeks with Head PE. So it was us, Spine Shank, and Head PE.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, I remember them.
And I remember BC would come out every night and he would be like, "Yeah, fucking Spine Shank fucking spanked you guys today." We'd be like, "Fuck." And then he'd come out the next night and he'd be like, "Oh, Spine Shank, man, Slaves on Dope buried you." And just having that environment was just so fun, but it was all in good jest. It was like, and
Yeah.
that's the thing that people seem to forget is that when you're out on the road, and especially with metal bands, when you're on those tours that, 4 or 5 bands, you're out for 3 months or 2 months or whatever, there's just this camaraderie that happens. And it's the most fun environment to be in, when you're out there and you're having fun. And especially when you're a band that's toughed it out for years, when you finally get on a bill where there's going to be 500 to 1,000 kids at every venue, there's something that happens to you, especially if you've been doing it a long time and you finally get to that point. And I'm sure you were a musician for a long time before you got to the point where
It's a
yeah,
morale boost. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like it's like, okay, we are doing this. Like
Yeah.
like people said, oh, Bad Nights, Bad Wolves, overnight sensation. I'm like, dude, you got, and respectfully, John slugged it out in Devil Driver for years. Doc
yeah,
was playing with God forbid in clubs. Kyle wasn't in this moment. He was also in Scar the Martyr with Joey Jordison, and
yeah,
Chris was in Bury Your Dead and before the Fallen Dreams. I'm like, we've been digging trenches for
years.
2 decades,
Yeah,
and they're like overnight success. I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
30. I was 36. I'm like, it took me 36 years to go platinum, right? And I never even thought I would,
yeah.
right? It's like, okay, like I guess this is happening. But that's also too. It's like having that height of success, and then also having it all taken away, and then all the. I just kind of am like, you know, I guess this is happening. I had to take somebody I love to the hospital this on Saturday. They tried to commit suicide,
Oh,
and like I'm so like I don't know if I'm desensitized. Like my buddy last week, who I was known since I was 17, he overdosed. My friend Doug killed himself, like all in the same week. And
oh,
and they say that if you stay sober, you better you better buy a black suit because you're going to go to a lot of funerals.
It's the truth.
I didn't think it'd be this much, but you just like you start just no matter what's going on, you start accepting life on life's terms, and whether it's for the better, for the worse. When things happen good, I don't really get excited anymore. When things happen bad, I don't really get excited anymore. You know, I just like you just start to like even out with maturity. But when you know everybody who's blown up, like you only have that one chance, and you're not nothing prepares you for it.
No.
You know, so there's no like there's no manual on like okay you're gonna blow up like your whole career is gonna take off. And I used to sober coach Justin Bieber, and that's actually what the lyrics to No Messiah is about. My time working with him and like going to church with him and living with him and just his distorted self views. And after having the teeny tiny fragment of success that I had a better understanding of how. Imagine being an undeveloped teen young person and
Mm.
you're thrust into the public spotlight.
not just a public spotlight. He was the most famous human in the world when all this was happening.
Yeah,
It is completely unfair. There was no private life. There was no room to grow or evolve. Like everything was everyone's business. And that sounds like a nightmare to me because when I was 13 and saying and doing stupid crap, no one cared,
yeah.
you know?
Like he toilet papered his neighbor's tree, and it was like front page news.
Yeah.
And no wonder these people have anxiety. No wonder that they, like, anything that happens. I mean, I don't really like with the metal media. Anything bad that happens in my life like gets exploited, right? Like
Hmm.
my girlfriend was assaulted a couple weeks ago, and then I went to go pick her up, and like she was in a podunk town, and I got arrested, and like they probably locked me up because I was black. Probably because I'm 6'1" and I'm 261 pounds. And, I just went in there, and then they looked me up and realized who I was. And they were like, ooh, like, you know, they let me out. Like,
Right.
so there's still some Tommy Vext privilege going on, and then I haven't even made a statement about this, but like I got a lawyer and all this stuff. The whole thing was vacated because the police department didn't want me to file a lawsuit for wrongful imprisonment.
Right.
So everything got thrown away. And it didn't matter because metal sucks and my ex guitar player and all these people, they were like, look, like here's a mugshot, which I'm laughing in because it's absurd. And just because, the media was weaponized against me because I voted conservative in 2020. And the problem is that it's what they do now is any chance that they get to publicly smear you once you're on the target list, they'll follow you for the rest of your life. And anything they can do, they will use. And, you know, that's that's bizarre to me.
It's got to feel weird though. I mean, being someone who, you know that we're like especially alcoholics, like there's so many things we don't have. Like we don't have the luxury of anger. We can't harbor resentment. Like we can, but it's not good for us. And
Yeah,
so
it's
all these
toxic.
things, it's super toxic, especially for alcoholics. So it's got to be tough when you probably deep down want to just be peaceful, want to just do good work, want to just do the right thing, but it still is this thing where no matter what you do, you get caught up in this shit. And I know deep down, because we are very similar in that sense, we do have that same kind of upbringing, if you will, of being sober. we don't want that because we know it's not good for us. Like resentment, all that, it just fucking tears us apart. It's the fucking worst. So it's gotta suck when you get caught up in it. And you probably are just at one point just like, fuck, I just don't want to fucking feel like this anymore.
Well, like this is the like intelligence and understanding is the for me, like for example, these metal sucks hired an independent person to do a hit piece on my girlfriend who is an esthetician. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and the person they hired is a mentally ill. It's a and I say this with respect to, there's a difference between being a trans person and being a lunatic. And there's a lot of people who my friends in the trans community are very upset because people are masquerading as being trans and they're actually not, right? To them, it's blackface. And they hired this like unemployed crazy person who had made a video getting that I think they got fired from Best Buy, and and then they hired them as an independent journalists to write a hit piece because, Metal Sucks is owned by Sony, and Sony doesn't want to get sued. So I'm like, why do you like? What is the investment, right? What is the investment here? And why is it that a person that I love who's been assaulted by her alcoholic father, who was her childhood abuser, who is not supposed to be on the property, why are you writing a hit piece on a victim if we believe all women?
Yeah.
Right? Like it's the same thing. It's like in 2020, I was falsely accused of domestic violence. I went to court and I was exonerated, and no charges were filed. I didn't commit a crime. There was no evidence, and it was never reported on.
Right.
Because believe all women, and me too. But if you date, if you're in a relationship with a guy who voted for Trump once, oh well, you're not a person anymore. And it's a very like something is wrong with the quality of journalism that has infiltrated all these aspects of the metal community and the rock community.
Well, I
You know,
think one of the things, being someone who was a part of the media at one point, I was a radio host for 14 years. I know that just in my little world of radio, being owned by a corporation, what they're doing is they take journalists that had been around for years and years, radio hosts that have been around for years and years, and what they do is once they get to a certain point where they've been there too long and they're making too much money, they put them out to pasture and they get someone younger with less experience. So I think that has a trickle down effect on everyone coming into journalism and anyone coming into broadcasting. You get people that haven't paid their dues. They haven't cut their teeth on anything. They haven't done their 10,000 hours. So you get a level of journalism and a level of broadcasting and all that stuff that just gets watered down. And what happens is that we all have cameras. We all have a way to broadcast. So everything that gets out there is just, you have no more craft to it. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's a double-edged sword where it's good in a way because you're not gatekeeped as much. Like people can get out there and say things, but the other side of it is that you have a lot of people that don't know fucking anything, that have a platform that if they get popular, they can get out there and they can say whatever the fuck they want. So it is a difficult place to navigate.
it's also, to me, the strange thing to me is that, I don't like identify as Republican. I don't identify. I'm like, I identify as American, and if anything, I'm an anti-statist.
Right.
I am like less government, less taxes, no wars, leave me alone.
Yeah.
And whichever party is closer to that is who I vote for. So it's like, nobody cared if I voted for Obama. No one would have canceled me if I voted for Mitt Romney.
Mm.
But something weird happened over the course of from 2015 to the present, and it's fallen apart now. And for some reason, all of these like media conglomerates, and I don't know if it has to do with the industrial war complex. I don't know if it has to do with some personal issue. they basically anybody who supported Trump was a white supremacist or this, which like that couldn't stick on me. So they kept they have to find all these ways to discredit you from having a legitimized opinion, and being an informed part of the citizenry, right? Like, you know, if for anything else other than that there was no major wars going on, that's a solid reason to vote for somebody. And the thing that bewilders me, like you know who's the so Maria Ferrara, I love her, like from Shrapnel. She's got one of the biggest like PR companies, and she could not be more left as possible. She'll just no. And we had a really good talk the other day, and I'm like, why will the Democratic Party not allow a good candidate to run? And she was like, I don't know. I'm like, why won't they let Bernie run? Like, why won't they let Robert Kennedy Jr. run? Why wouldn't it, like they could have Tulsi Gabbard run? There's so many, like, and it's both sides, right, of the political aisle. I'm like, why is it that every 4 years you guys present us with this?
Yeah, this is the best you got.
Yeah, there's millions and millions of qualified citizens. Well, not
There's
qualified
so many.
citizens, but
There's
citizens that
so
could.
many. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's so many other people.
I remember when Bernie Sanders was really trying to, and not to get political, because I'm not really a political person. I'm Canadian too, so I mean, my politics. What's going on in your country is, we have our own politics here, but
we're like the neighbor in Home Improvement, just peeking over the fence. We're like,
Yeah. You're like, what are they doing over there?
But I remember, okay, so here's a good example. I remember visiting Shannon Steckloff, right? Colleen's sister. Shannon is one of my best friends. And I remember visiting Shannon, and we were in like West Hollywood, where she lives, kind of near Lockma, like in that little area on Orange.
Okay, yeah.
She lives in the same place. And I remember Bernie Sanders had a campaign headquarters that was in LA. And I remember, like, I said to myself, Bernie Sanders looks like the way a politician should fucking look. He looks disheveled. He looks like all he is trying to fight for you. Like, I'm just concerned about everything. And he didn't have that polished look. Like, he looks like he'd been in the fucking trenches working.
Yeah.
I remember saying to myself, they're never going to fucking get a guy like that, because he doesn't have the it factor. But if anything, he probably cared more than most guys that I had seen in that position in a long time,
But they also wouldn't let Robert Kennedy Jr. run, and he's been, he's sober like 40 years.
Yeah.
And he's a traditional Democrat. And here's the thing, like, people are very tribalistic.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, I don't like his
Christ,
stance on abortion, and I don't like his stance on guns. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. But however, the most important things to me is not like if someone likes guns or not.
No.
It's not if somebody like is what, I'm like, I'm at a place, the economy is at a place where economic things matter, like not allowing private corporatized buyouts of residential homes across the country, because there are two massive conglomerate companies who combined have more money than most of the countries in Europe, and they are buying land and they're buying residences so that the American dream of owning your own home slowly is becoming.
This is the plot to Superman 1. I'm just telling you right now.
It's like,
yeah.
I'm like, they must have did something.
Luther wanted to own the land. He wanted to own the only good land, and ruin all the rest of it, so they would have to, like, he would have ownership.
Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor. That's what he wanted.
Yeah. But I mean, they always sneak that stuff in. So it's like that, and just his stance on making pharmaceuticals legally responsible for damaging people. Pretty good stuff, like, lowering taxes, being anti-war. Like, I'm at the point, people get on the bandwagon, and it's almost like the micro genres. They're like, a war happens and people rush to put up a flag of another country. I'm like, how about no more people dying?
Yeah.
Like, how about not that? Because the people who are causing the wars They're not fighting them. Poor people fight the wars. Poor people are getting killed. Poor people are dying, not the 1%.
That goes back to the monarchy too. Like, what did a king and queen care if 1,000 troops got killed in the front line like in 5 minutes by cannon fire? Like, they don't care. They're like, no, no, we have to do this. And it's cold and it's sad. And I just kind of wish that some people would kind of even look at the science fiction we all love and see examples of what's happening in it.
Mhm.
And it's science fiction has come. It's history repeats itself, and I find that I think we all need to pay attention to history a little bit more because this has all happened before. The AI has only existed a little bit. Oh, I don't know, Terminator.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's
Yeah,
Animal Farm, there's,
yeah.
1984, you've got,
1984 was written before televisions existed. Okay, like, and they had the monitors in there with a giant face. It's fascinating.
Yeah,
yeah,
well, like
Uh,
sci-fi has always been a parallel of what's to come.
Yeah.
it's creative minds being maybe divinely inspired to give warnings to the masses about what could happen. But also, too, you have to run the same sort of theory that maybe the people who are doing this were inspired by these fucking pieces of science fiction. You know what I mean? It's like, wait a second, like, you know, maybe this would have never happened if George Orwell didn't put out that fucking book, you know?
right, right. I wanted to ask you because we've been on for almost an hour, and I know. I mean, I could talk to you for hours, but I wanted to ask you about what's going on right now in your world musically. I know you've got music that's been releasing. I know you've got tours and tour dates that are announcing. So I want to know where you're at with all that, so people can know.
Yeah, yeah. So I have a new record coming out on July 5th, and it's called Antarctica. Um, it's a 15 track record. Most of the songs were played on guitar by Angel Vivaldi, uh,
Ooh,
who's an old
wow!
friend of mine. Yeah,
I
absolutely
love how you. I
phenomenal
love how you
guitar
just like.
player.
I love how you just drop that down. It's like, come on, like
Well,
do.
he did casually say before, yeah, when I lived with Justin Bieber and was the sober coach. I'm like, that's usually a theme of a show. Like there's an
Yeah,
hour there, but it's just like, yes, this is just one of the things I did that month. Okay, next. You have a fascinating life.
what is it? I didn't get sober to not live an extraordinary life and be around
100%. I
extraordinary
love it.
I
people.
like that. That's a cool. That's cool.
uh,
Story.
yeah, and Angel is
Yep.
I mean, if people aren't familiar with Angel Vivaldi, just look him up.
Yep.
Amazing guitar player, and so yeah, we some of the guys that I co-wrote with Bad Wolf stuff. These songs are there. There's some guys I revamped relationships with old Westville Massacre members and worked on stuff with them.
Oh,
And then
nice.
I'm going to be going on tour July 21st. It's not a tour. I'm doing a week's run of shows in Texas. So we'll be in Corpus Christi, Austin, Katy, Texas, and 2 shows in Dallas in the end of July. And then I fly to England late August. I have separate bands now, so I'm putting together a Canadian band for a Canadian tour too. So I have a U.S. band, a Canadian band in the works, and a band
Nice.
in UK, Europe, and we'll be playing at the Underground in London on Friday, September 5th, and in Manchester at at Rebellion on the next day, so the Saturday. Then I come back to the States, and then I have a few weeks off to shoot music videos, and then on Halloween I will be engaging in a 6 week U.S. tour. So
Nice.
you can go to TommyVexOfficial.com and find out all my social medias and tour dates and blah 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 blah.
Ryan, we usually ask a couple of nerdy questions. So do you want to go ahead and ask those nerdy questions?
Yeah, sure. Let's leave light.
Because we are
Um,
we are nerdy, as you can see behind all.
Yeah.
You know.
well, if I could just turn the camera around you, I have a giant Ninja Turtle painting. And I'm so nerdy that they all have the red bandanas like the OG comic.
Oh,
Anyway,
nice.
so speaking of stuff, clearly I've been on a vinyl kick and I've collected vinyls and EC com. That is the only thing I collect anymore. I don't collect DVDs, but I go nuts for two specific things. But I've lived a long life and I have many action figures and many, incredible things. I was a big DVD person. What is something that you personally collect? And being a world traveler, the benefit of being a collector because you get to go experience
Um,
all these things.
I don't. What do I don't. I mean, I still have my comic collection from when I was a kid.
Okay.
But but as an adult, um, I'm a weird guy. Like I find no value in material possession.
Okay.
I don't have anything like other
You
like
and you and
Jacoby, it's
Jacoby
the same thing.
should have a high five or something and
yeah.
just celebrate the nothing that you have in your suitcases.
What do you collect, Jacoby? He's like, I don't really collect anything.
So like
I collect memories and experiences, which is a great
yeah.
answer.
Yeah.
So like I'll give you guys this. So the story made famous by Remember When is a true story. And for the people who don't know, the Bad Wolves Remember When song is the narration of my twin brother attempted to murder me and successfully did so. So I'm actually a near death experience person.
You
When I
keep bringing up these things that are the most fascinating thing I've ever heard in my entire life, and it's just a half sentence when you're moving on to something else. Are you
well,
okay? That
yeah,
is
yeah,
incredible.
this
Oh,
happened. This
first of
happened.
all, you have a twin. Second of
Yeah.
all, oh no.
So
Jeez.
this happened in 2010, and so what I did experience um, in the process of dying, I was bleeding internally, and I succumbed to my wounds, and uh, my whole life flashed before my eyes, and it was not. It was all it was like a highlight reel of all the most beautiful moments of my life. From like I can't even remember like holding my grandma's hands when I was little, up here, and the first girl I kissed, or all those things, like these like core emotional memories, all downloaded like a flash.
Hmm.
And like now, I I take mental screenshots,
Hmm.
right? So like when I'm really in the like this has happened multiple times on stage, and people don't know why I cry. Like I would play zombie at the end of a festival, and then I'd see all the people, and I would cry. And then I remember this at Grass Pop, people in the crowd started crying. I got really emotional because it had occurred to me that I almost missed all this.
Right.
Like I almost missed it. And yes, I had, overdosed before and like this, that, the other, but something happens when you die, when you get killed and you want to live and you're sober and you remember everything and you understand the value. And this is also why I'm anti-war, because the value of life. Um, whenever my clock gets punched and I don't get to say when that happens, I want to make sure that that's got to be the best movie I could ever write. Like it has to be. Like I
Yeah.
want like when I go, that highlight reel has to be like 10, 100 times longer with so many more memories and so much more, you know, goodness and lessons and landscapes and hugs and you know everything that makes life worthwhile. Because for somebody like me, I've struggled with depression and poverty and suicidal thoughts, and I'm an attempted suicide survivor. Like I've been to hell, and like life is for the living. That's why I collect. You know,
I love it. I
yeah.
love it.
It's a long answer.
It's a good answer. It's a good answer, and it's an honest answer, and I can relate because the older I get, yeah, I got a lot of shit around me, but the stuff that matters the most to me, I would get rid of everything in this house to have certain things, and I know that, and that's why I don't attach myself to anything. If I can give it to someone and it puts a smile on their face, it's the best feeling in the world. You know.
Mhm.
I look at a lot of my collection stuff and just thinking I'm like, we know a gentleman named Mike Babbins. He's moved to Vancouver, but when I was 20 and I was getting out of this, I can only like punk. He's like Molly Crew rules. Listen to them and reignited my love of Kiss and all that. And he passed me so much stuff that he had. He turned 28 at one point. He's like, I don't want the stuff, you have it. So I had all this amazing things and these memories he's collected over the years, and I want to do the same thing. I want to just keep it going. Like yes, I didn't enjoy it, but hoarding joy is kind of selfish and weird, and you don't have to. If it's not bringing you joy anymore, it is time for someone else to feel that way.
Yeah, it's like a song that never gets recorded.
Yeah.
Just record it. Just put it out.
Yeah.
Tommy, thanks for taking the time to chat, man. I appreciate it. I'm glad we were able to do this. I'd love to have you on again. Good luck with the upcoming tour. Good luck with the record.
Thanks.
And keep being you, man. You're an original. And what I love about you is you're not afraid. You're not afraid to talk about stuff. You're not afraid to give your opinion, but at the same time, you're willing to listen. And I think that's what we're kind of lacking in the world is conversations.
Oh
And
God,
and I'm
yeah.
and I'm really glad that you and I, our paths cross, that we're friends, and that we'll continue to be friends, because we got a lot in common, and you got a lot of great more years to live, and so do I. So let's keep doing them together.
Here's to 50 more.
Thank you so much for joining us this week on the show. We absolutely appreciate everything that you guys do for us, and your support means the absolute world. Please like and subscribe wherever you listen to the podcast, or if you watch us on YouTube, do the same. And let us know in the comments below who you'd like us to talk to in the future. If you've got any suggestions, we're really, really open to that. And you're going to be seeing us more and more out in the field doing content as well, with the podcast. So looking forward to seeing some of you, meeting some of you in real life. And also coming up very soon, we're going to be launching our merch line. So we'll have coffee mugs, we'll have hats, we'll have hoodies, we'll have all kinds of stuff, so you guys can rep the podcast everywhere you go. So thank you again for supporting us. Thank you to our friends over at Heartbeat Hot Sauce, the heartbeat of the Rockman Power Hour. And thank you to Audio Technica. Thank you to Studio House Designs, my co-host Ryan Stick, and my producer Julia Kajerski, and to all of you. Without you, we would not be able to do this. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next time on the Rockman Power Hour. Hey, thanks so much for watching the podcast. We really appreciate your support. And if you're enjoying the podcast, click this link right over here to watch the next episode, and click right over here and subscribe. And that way you won't